Good evening, everyone. My name is Danica Saunders, and I will be your host this evening. And welcome to the Understanding and Managing Anxiety webinar. Joining us this evening, we have Katlego Mlombo, who is a counseling psychologist and experienced higher education leader with over a decade of experience in student-centered roles. Her work is grounded in a deep commitment to holistic student support, integrating academic and emotional, as well as psychological well-being. She currently serves as head of campus at SACAP's Pretoria campus, where she combines strategic leadership with compassionate care. She is passionate about wellness and self-actualization. Katlego brings both clinical insight and operational acumen to every aspect of her work. Next, we have Jared Oberholster, who is an HPCSA registered counselor and program coordinator in applied psychology at SACAP. He has a strong interest in various areas of the field of psychology, incorporating real-world application, research, and evidence-based practice, and believes that practical application of knowledge is essential. Jared believes that counseling and mental health support is for everyone and should be there to provide customized support and effective intervention through education and practical action. And now, without any further ado, I will hand over to Kat. Thank you.
Thanks, Danica. It's lovely to be here. Good evening, everybody. And I'm so happy that you are all able to join us tonight. I'm quite excited to explore this topic of anxiety with you today. I think as a counseling psychologist, as a leader, as a mom, and as a little bit of an anxious Annie myself, I find the topic of anxiety to be really relevant. I think the world we live in today, the country that we live in, the way that we live our lives nowadays really sets us up to experience anxiety in some shape or form. So tonight we're going to look at what anxiety is, where it comes from, and why it's important for us to manage anxiety. We'll also look at some common triggers and symptoms that you might experience, and then I'll hand over to Jared, who will cover some strategies for managing anxiety. So, what is anxiety? It's a natural response to a perceived threat, and we all feel anxiety. It's part of our survival mechanism, and it's been a part of us since the beginning of time. If you think back to when we were cavemen, when humans lived in caves, even those humans experienced anxiety. So we've really evolved over time to experience anxiety as a way for our brain to signal to our body that something isn't quite right. And when we experience anxiety, we might feel worry, we might feel nervous, or just a sense of dis-ease. And it's typically about something with an uncertain outcome. So although anxiety is quite a normal feeling for everybody, it can become chronic or overwhelming, and it can really interfere with daily life. If it's not just worry, it can impact us physically, it can impact us mentally, it can even impact us emotionally. And while we all experience it from time to time, like before a big presentation or an exam, it becomes a concern when anxiety is intense, when it's persistent, and if it interferes with our daily lives. So maybe now we can learn about where anxiety comes from, so where it originates. There are physiological but also psychological origins of anxiety, and so it originates in the body but also in the brain. And I'm sure you've all heard of something called the fight or flight response, and over the years it's been adapted, and kind of that definition has been widened, and now we talk about the fight, flight, or freeze response, and some scholars are even talking about the fight, flight, freeze, flop, and fawn. But just for the purposes of this discussion today, we'll refer to it as the fight or flight response. And this is really what happens in our brain and our body when that survival mechanism is activated. So if you think back to the caveman I mentioned, and we imagine him being out looking for berries or looking for a small animal to hunt for food, and he encounters a lion. As he registers the sight of the lion, his brain interprets that as a threat and triggers the fight or flight response. So what happens in the brain is that the amygdala, which is a small little part of our brain that's situated very, very deep in our brain at the base of the skull, triggers this fight or flight response. And it creates a whole bunch of physical symptoms in the body. And when the amygdala detects a threat or it perceives danger, whether this danger is real or imagined, it sets off a whole cascade of responses. And this can even happen even before we physically or consciously register a threat. So what the amygdala does is that it sounds the alarm and the body prepares to defend itself. And so our body releases cortisol and adrenaline, and these two are known as our stress hormones. And then this causes a whole bunch of things to happen in our body. So we might feel increased heart rate, we might have a rapid breathing, we usually breathe quite shallow, we'll have muscle tension, we might experience sweating, dilated pupils, and even an upset stomach or nausea. And under normal circumstances, this reaction in our body is supposed to be a short-term response. So once you are safely able to get away from the lion and there no longer is a threat, your body's supposed to return back to its normal state, and things go back to normal. The problem comes in when this system stays overactivated and doesn't kind of switch off even when there's no real threat. And so you'll remember I mentioned cortisol and adrenaline, and those were the two stress hormones that trigger this whole series of events in our bodies. And these are released by the adrenal glands during stress and anxiety. And so adrenaline is a hormone that makes us react immediately to stress in the moment. But cortisol is what kind of stays in our body, and it's a longer lasting stress hormone that affects metabolism, it affects sleep, and it can also affect memory. And so you can start to see how if we have chronic anxiety, our cortisol level is also probably at a higher level than what it should be. And this can lead to fatigue, it can lead to poor concentration, a person can struggle with insomnia, and you can even have weakened immune function. And there's lots of research coming out at the moment about how chronically high cortisol levels cause inflammation in the body, and inflammation is responsible for many like chronic diseases like arthritis, like diabetes, like even many cancers. So chronically high cortisol is really, really dangerous for our bodies. Some people are actually born with a more sensitive nervous system or even inherit a predisposition to anxiety disorders. And this doesn't mean that anxiety is guaranteed, but it can lower the threshold for anxiety responses. So people can be kind of set up to experience anxiety more often if there is a family history of anxiety. And then lastly, the gut-brain axis is really important in how we are able to modulate anxiety in our body. And so the gut and the brain, so our stomach, our intestines, are connected to the brain through a nerve that runs all the way down our bodies, and that's called the vagus nerve. And when we have imbalances in our gut, or our gut is not healthy, this really can impact anxiety levels. So anything like poor digestion, inflammation, and if our gut microbiome is imbalanced, these things have all been linked to anxiety symptoms. Another interesting thing about the gut is that 90% of our serotonin production, so serotonin is a hormone that makes us feel good, 90% of that is produced in our gut. So it's really, really important for us to take care of our gut and make sure that our gut is functioning healthily, so that we can support ourselves and fight anxiety. In the next slide, we'll cover some of the psychological roots of anxiety. And a lot of the time that this stems from how people think. But also learned experiences can have an impact on a person's propensity to be anxious or not. The first of these thought patterns is called cognitive distortions, and this is really how it just refers to unhelpful thinking patterns that are often inaccurate or overly negative. And examples of that could be catastrophizing. So sometimes people just kind of imagine the worst case scenario all the time, and those kinds of people are more prone to be anxious. Many anxious people engage in black and white thinking, and this is really how like a person sees things as all good or all bad, all in or all out, like just all or nothing thinking that leaves very little space for functioning in the gray area. And another type of cognitive distortion could be mind reading, where you think you know what other people are thinking, or you walk into a room and you assume that people are talking negatively about you. We refer to that as mind reading. And these distorted thought patterns really serve to just feed anxious thoughts and emotions. Another type of psychological root for anxiety is negative core beliefs. And these are beliefs that are really deep-seated, and they are ideas about ourselves, ideas about other people, our ideas about the world. And these are often shaped in childhood. And examples of these could be I'm not good enough. The world is unsafe. Other people are unsafe or can't be trusted, or I have to be perfect. These beliefs and these belief systems create vulnerability to anxiety, especially when life triggers those core beliefs, or when life triggers challenge those core beliefs. Learned behavior and conditioning. So sometimes we can become anxious just because we see other people being anxious. And so, like if we experience early trauma, or if we have overprotective parents who don't allow much space for like healthy risk taking, if we witness anxious behavior in caregivers, we may learn to fear specific situations or develop avoidance habits that only serve to maintain anxiety. As well as, and I think this one is big at the moment if you are on social media, there's a lot of public discourse at the moment about trauma and unprocessed emotions. And when we go through life and we don't process grief, we don't process fear, we don't process anger, and instead we suppress or we don't resolve those emotions, they can really manifest as chronic anxiety. Trauma in particular, if it's not treated, it will often lead to hypervigilance and a heightened anxiety response. And perfectionism is another one that can lead to anxiety. And I think in the day of social media that we live in today, the drive to meet unrealistic standards can really create this constant pressure for people, and a fear of failure, which leads to, a performance-related anxiety and a general sense of worry if you are always comparing yourself to these people who are seemingly perfect. So in general, people with anxiety really often struggle without knowing with or not having control. If you feel out of control, you probably struggle with anxiety. And this can lead to, overthinking. It can lead to avoidance of situations or people. It can lead to over planning or hypervigilance. And all of these behaviors really just serve to amplify or feed anxiety instead of help you feel better, actually. So in the next slide, we'll cover some common triggers of anxiety. And like I said, in this day and age, it feels like anything can trigger anxiety. And triggers can be external, like social pressure or financial stress, or triggers can be internal, like self-critical thoughts or even memories, like in the case of trauma. If you have trauma that is not processed, you might struggle with intrusive memories or flashbacks, and that can be very, very anxiety provoking. And here on the screen, I've just provided some common triggers that I hear from clients of mine. And so everyday things like caffeine and medication can even contribute to how anxious a person feels. An unbalanced diet, which we've mentioned. Work environment is a really big one. I sit with many, many clients who are burnt out and anxious, and they wake up in the morning and they struggle to, you know, force themselves to get out of bed because they're so anxious about what is facing them at work that day. Conflict, financial concerns, public performances, and life transitions can really all impact and trigger anxiety. We can now maybe have a look at what symptoms a person might experience if they have anxiety. And it can really show up in many different ways. It can show up in our bodies, in our emotions, in our thoughts, in our behaviors. Some physical symptoms of anxiety could be a racing heart, could be nausea, could be an inability to relax. Some emotional symptoms could be irritability or just like walk. If you've ever felt like a pit in the bottom of your stomach, just that sense of dread, carrying that feeling around all day, every day, could be a sign of anxiety. Cognitively, sometimes people struggle with overthinking. People struggle to focus on tasks that they're doing at work or at school. People might struggle with memory problems. And behaviorally, people might engage in avoidance or reassurance seeking, or just being hyper vigilant. So this sense of always having to like scan the room to see, like to assess if there's any threats. So all of these are common symptoms of anxiety. And in general, I think anxiety can cause people to feel sick and generally overwhelmed, to avoid certain situations or get stuck in overthinking. And it's really important to recognize these patterns so that you are better able to manage your anxiety. And why is it important for us to manage anxiety? I think a more pertinent question is that if we don't manage anxiety, what could happen then? And the answer is that anxiety can really, really take a serious toll on our physical health, on our relationships, on our work or our school. And actually, to avoid what makes us anxious only reinforces the anxiety. And so, physically, chronic anxiety takes a toll on the body. A few slides ago, we looked at what happens inside our body when the fight or flight response is triggered. And so, if you remember, like I said, that response is supposed to be a temporary thing, and our body's supposed to be able to go back to normal. But when people are anxious, their body stays in that heightened state of arousal. And that's really, really bad for our bodies in a biological way. And like I said, this leads to fatigue, headaches, to digestive issues, to insomnia, and a weakened immune system. And over time, this is how people become burnt out, and it increases the risk of health conditions, like I mentioned earlier, very serious chronic health conditions. Anxiety also really impacts our mental clarity and our ability to feel emotionally resilient. And so anxiety narrows our ability to think clearly, to solve problems, or even to make decisions. When anxiety is high, we can really struggle with concentration. We can struggle with memory. Our emotional reactivity increases. And so managing anxiety helps to restore a sense of emotional regulation and resilience, and kind of helps to restore us to be able to access our rational brain. If you remember, right at the beginning, I spoke about how the amygdala, which is the fear center in our brain, and it's actually a really real small part of our brain, and it's hidden deep in what is called the old brain. When that part becomes activated, that's where all our emotions come from. And then in the front of our brain is what's called the prefrontal cortex. And this is where all our rational thinking happens, our planning, all our executive functions kind of happen in the front of our brain. But when our amygdala is activated in this way, so we're in fight or flight mode, this part of the brain completely goes offline. So we aren't able to access our rational brain. And so if our anxiety is unchecked or is unmanaged, then it's really hard for us to perform everyday functions like make decisions at work because our rational brain is basically offline. Anxiety can really affect our relationships because people can be irritable, they can become withdrawn or isolated, they can become over dependent on others. And if you'll remember, I spoke about reassurance seeking. So someone who's anxious often needs quite a lot of reassurance from the people around them, like, are you upset with me? Do you like me? Or did I upset you? Did I do something wrong? And that can be quite taxing on the people around you if you struggle with anxiety. And this can add strain on relationships, both personally and professionally. So managing anxiety can help us to connect with people more authentically and more calmly. And unmanaged anxiety also interferes with our daily functioning. And so when it becomes overwhelming, it can stop us from trying new things. It can cause us to avoid responsibilities. It can lead to missed opportunities at work, at school, or even socially because we're just too scared to try new things. And so managing our anxiety can help to restore a sense of control and confidence in ourselves and taking on daily tasks. And so when we manage anxiety, we can really enhance our quality of life. Because if we manage our anxiety, we can improve just a general sense of like peace of mind. We can improve our self-esteem, and we can enjoy a more whole sense of well-being. And managing anxiety really does help us to live a life that feels more free, that feels more purpose-driven, and connected, rather than being ruled by fear or worry. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Jared, who's going to talk us through some strategies for managing anxiety. But just remember that you aren't alone. I think anxiety is very common. I see it in my practice. I see it in my work on a day-to-day basis. And even children, like I mentioned, I am a mom, so even children feel like they're much more anxious nowadays. But it's also really treatable. The more we understand anxiety, the better we can manage it. And reaching out for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. And I'm sure Jared is going to speak more into this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kat. And thank you for an excellent explanation on anxiety. And I think to everyone listening, keep in mind everything that Kat has shared in regards to understanding the anxiety. I think it'll really help if you kind of have that understanding of perhaps where your anxiety sits, where it's from, as we go through ways to kind of manage it in the short term. Just a disclaimer before I get into my section, everything that I do share here today is informational, is educational, not to be interpreted as a counseling session or any therapeutic intervention. But if you do need support, please do reach out to a counselor, psychologist, or any relevant healthcare professional. Okay, as Kat said, you're not alone. So I'll be exploring how to effectively manage anxiety, looking at a concept called homeostasis, explaining what it is and how we can use it. Then I'll go into techniques for managing anxiety. And finally, how can certain counseling skills support individuals facing anxiety? So moving into the next slide, what is homeostasis? So I mentioned this earlier. Some of you may be a bit confused, but to give you kind of a brief explanation of it, homeostasis is a physiological concept that is rooted in the body's ability to self-regulate. So essentially, how does the body keep itself in balance? And going back to what Kat explained about, when you have a perceived fear, your body reacts to it. It's the same thing. So for some people, you might start feeling anxious and you can't sit still. You want to move around. And from an evolutionary psychology perspective, that could be you wanting to get away from the danger. And we all react to anxiety in different ways. But homeostasis is our body's way of saying, okay, we need to somehow react to this to make us feel safe, to make us feel calm. And it's not just with anxiety, it's with everything. When we get hot, we sweat so our bodies can cool down. When we get cold, we start shivering. Sure, everyone's felt a bit of cold this season, but we start shivering, and that's our body's way of saying, okay, we need to warm up. But homeostasis isn't all bad, as we can use this to kind of trick our brains a little bit into feeling more calm. It's important to know that with homeostasis and with our body's ability to feel anxiety, it's impossible for our body to feel both anxious and calm at the same time. Now, that may sound a bit strange, but it will be relevant going forward. Our body can't react to both feelings of anxiety and the feeling of calm at the exact same time. We can feel anxious and act calm, or we can act anxious and actually feel very calm, but we can never feel both emotions at the same time. And in the next slide, we will be exploring a little bit more into managing anxiety using homeostasis. So anxiety is both mental and physical. So how do we use this to our advantage? We can essentially tell our brain, our mind, to say, hey, we're actually okay. We're feeling the anxiety, but there's no direct threat that's in front of us right now. We can tell our body, or we can use our body to tell our brain it's okay to calm down. The anxiety is not conducive to our environment that we're in right now. So in the same way that our minds, when they get anxious, can tell our body to sweat, that we need to move, that we need to run, that we need to do something. If we take control of our body to say, okay, actually we're calm, I don't need to move, or I'm feeling every presence, every sensation within my body now, I'm focused on that. Our brains kind of go, okay, actually, we're being told that things are okay. We don't need to keep releasing our stress hormones. We're in a good space. And we can do this through various actions that we will explore, such as physical and mindful actions. So being present in the moment, paying attention to your body, paying attention to your surroundings. And with this, you'll develop a toolkit for yourself based on multiple techniques, understanding yourself, and that develops a sort of mindset that you can run to when you need it. When you feel anxiety, you know what to do, you know how to help yourself in that moment. And as we move on, we will kind of explore a bit of the brief techniques, the short term. What can we do in the moment as we're feeling anxious, as we feel it coming along? So let's have a look at two of those techniques that I have selected. First is breathing, and the next one is grounding. It's important to know that these are short-term techniques by themselves. They form part of a toolkit. So no one technique is going to be able to guide you through your entire process through managing anxiety by itself. It's important to use them not in isolation, but as part of kind of your self-help toolkit when you feel anxiety, when it comes along. And of course, sometimes we can't manage it ourselves, and that's when it's important to reach out for support. And the reason I've selected these two is for the main reason that they're two that I use myself, and two that I've seen success in with the people that I've worked with. And most favorite of mine is that they're really simple. You can do them at any point as long as it's a safe environment. I don't recommend closing your eyes and breathing while you're driving. So yeah, using these two techniques that I'm going to go through can really form part of your toolkit and assist you in going forward. The first is breathing. Now, we all breathe on a daily basis, and if you're not, be concerned, but this breathing is more mindful, more focused. When we get anxious, we might breathe very quickly. And this is, again, our body's way of reacting. But now we're going to counter that by saying, okay, no, we don't need to breathe quickly. We can take deep breaths. We can tell our body that actually we're okay. And what does it mean to be mindful when you're breathing? Well, it means focusing on every sensation that you're feeling while you're going through this technique. And this technique is in, hold, and out. This is breathing in for a set amount of time, 3 seconds in this example. You'll then hold that breath for 3 seconds and then breathe out for another 3. As you're doing this, you're going to focus on the air going in through your nostrils. And then when you hold it, you'll feel the pressure in your diaphragm. And then as you release, feeling the air over your lips as you blow out. And you'll do this as many times as you need to or are able to within the given scenario, given that it's a safe space and you're able to do it. You're going to focus on the sensation of your body, focusing on the breath and the counting as you go in and out. Some people may take longer, may breathe in for more seconds, hold it for more, and let it out for more. For some people, it may be less. It's important to do what's comfortable for you and what you're able to do. An important aspect for both breathing and grounding is to allow yourself to be in the moment and any thoughts that come along. So if you're doing any of these techniques, a thought pops into your mind and it makes you anxious. That thought is allowed to be there, but don't hold on to it. Let it be there and let it pass. If it's something important, you can come back to it at another time. Another time could be in 5 minutes, it could be later in the day. But while you're doing these techniques, those thoughts aren't conducive to your process for helping you through your anxiety. So let's look at grounding. As I said, this is putting yourself in the present, not worrying about the future or the past, focusing on the here and now, with you, your body, your anxiety, and your mind. You will allow any thoughts that come to simply pass. They're allowed to be there. They can stay for a moment, but don't hold on to them. And in this grounding technique, you'll use the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. Now, don't worry, this isn't counting down. What you're going to do is employ your senses. You'll start at 5. What are 5 things that you can see, that you can physically see? It could be a color, an object, an animal. Then we'll move on to the 4. And with this, you're going to kind of ground yourself and think, okay, what can I hear? Okay, so these are the things I can see. Now, what are 4 things I can hear? I can hear birds. I can hear cars. I can hear the fan of a computer. Then we're going to go to 3. Okay, what are 3 things I can feel? Is it the pressure against your chair? Perhaps it's the clothing you're wearing. Are you cold? What are 3 things that you can feel in you? Next is your sense of smell. Now, sometimes this one's difficult because you can't always pick up, a specific smell, but do your best. And the same goes for the last technique, which is something you can taste. Now, often when I do this one, I'd say have something that is really quite different, something sour, something very sweet nearby. Not too much of it, but just to kind of bring your body to say, well, okay, this is something different. And your mind then focuses on that. So if you have lemon juice or something like that, use that. Otherwise, if you're stuck on 2 and you're thinking, I can only smell one thing, don't let it hold you up. And you can repeat the process as much as you need. Moving on, I'll be looking at one of my favorite methods for kind of managing anxiety. And this can be used in both short and long term, but it's exercise. And exercise truly is one of the best ways that you can manage not only your mental health, but your physical health. And in doing so, you create a healthy balance that can affect you going forward throughout your life. It's important to know that exercise, when it comes to self-regulation, doesn't need to be strenuous. It doesn't need to be a 5-kilometer run. It doesn't need to be lifting 100 kilos. It's something that gets your body moving, that kind of works in favor of your body and your mind. So when we work out, we release neurotransmitters that kind of counter our anxiety transmitters a little bit. So one of the main ones is norepinephrine and serotonin. And these are released when we exercise. So it kind of helps counter out that anxiety. And as I said, this can be small movements. Example of which, if you have any pets, taking your dog for a walk, playing with your cat, things like that. And one of the best ones that I think I like to use myself is going for a mindfulness walk. Now, what does this mean? It means going for a walk in a safe environment. If you can walk outside, or if you have a garden, anything like that. But to go outside, take a walk, and combine sort of your grounding. So as you're walking, okay, what can I see? What can I see that's different from, maybe my desk or my office? Okay, I'm walking, I can see trees. I can't always see that tree from my office. Oh, but it's nice to see it now. And what can I hear? What can I smell? So combining exercise and your mindfulness can really positively affect both your mental and physical health and sort of bring your anxiety levels down a bit. Yeah, and it's important to know that do what's comfortable for you. So if it is, 8 o'clock at night, it's freezing cold, you don't want to essentially go out and walk, it's not safe to walk, don't do that. But sometimes we kind of do need to force our bodies to say, okay, I'm doing this for me. I'm just going to go for 5 minutes, walk in the garden or around the block, wherever I can, but I'm doing this for myself, even though I know it's going to be a little bit difficult. But again, do what's safe and possible for you. Right, moving on, we are going to look at using certain counseling skills and the importance of using specific counseling skills to effectively manage anxiety. And similarly, in the next slide, I have selected 2 very broad skills that can go into far more detail, but that is communication and self-awareness. Now, communication as a counseling skill is comprised of multiple different factors, such as active listening and responding, and various others. But there are some aspects I want to focus on more specifically. One is self-communication or self-talk and the kindness therein. When you're feeling anxious, it's not the time to be hard on yourself. It's not the time to let your internal critic dictate who you are, where you should be, where you were. And that's where coming into the present and in the moment is so important. We oftentimes feel anxiety and we have a negative attitude towards ourselves. Why did we do something? Why we're worried about the future? Why didn't we prepare for it? Why didn't we do anything? That kind of thinking, that kind of self-talk isn't helpful to us in that time. It only causes more anxiety. And over time, we need to sort of adapt that to say, okay, when I'm feeling anxiety, I actually need to be kind to myself, not be hard on myself. Otherwise, I'm simply exacerbating that anxiety and it's not going to get better. Sometimes this is difficult to address. And when you're unable to do it by yourself, that's when I do recommend, reaching out for professional help. And that kind of does lead into the further aspects of communication, but being able to communicate your needs. Now, for some of us, this is easy. We can simply say, hey, this is what I need. This is where I am. But for others, it can be hard, especially when we feel anxiety. Sometimes people feel shame when it comes to anxiety. We don't want to acknowledge it. But it's important to not only acknowledge it for others, but acknowledge it for ourselves, to admit that, this is something that I'm working with. It doesn't make me less. It doesn't make it, doesn't put me in a less category or anything like that. It's something I'm going through and it's something I'm working through. And sometimes we need to communicate that, especially to those close to us, but most importantly to ourselves. So when it comes to somebody close that you trust, that, you can say to them, hey, this is what's going on. I'm feeling anxious. This is where I am. And sometimes that can really help the other person to better understand your needs, where you are, and how they can support you. And finally, communication is important when it comes to seeking help and support. Yes, we can communicate that, we're working through it, we're making progress, but sometimes we need to be able to reach out and say, okay, I need some help. I've got my toolkit, it's been working, but now it's not working anymore, or something else has happened. And it's important to reach out and to listen to yourself when you know that something isn't working. Don't get stuck on, let's say breathing works for you, but all of a sudden it's just not working for you anymore. You need to be able to listen to yourself and accept that, okay, this isn't working. It's not the end of it though. I can find something else. Yeah. Next, moving over to self-awareness, or as a counseling skill, would be self-reflexivity, or the ability to reflect on yourself. The first important point with this is learning and developing an awareness for your triggers. So when it comes to anxiety, we know there are certain things that can trigger our anxiety, as Kat had also mentioned. And when we have the ability to identify these triggers, we know what they are, we know when they're going to be here. That leads me to the next point, which is prevention and preparation. So we know a trigger is public speaking, for example. If I can avoid public speaking, that's perfect. But sometimes it's not always feasible. Say it's part of your job requirement, or you signed up to something to say, I'll do this, I'll help out, but it involves public speaking. Now it's time where we can't prevent it, but we can prepare for it. This is when we know, okay, this is going to happen. I can't avoid it, but I'm going to prepare. I know that if I'm speaking in public, having a stress ball really assists me with my anxiety, something simple like that. Or before the time, I give myself a pep talk, encouraging that kind of positive self-talk that we go through. We can prepare for it. Anxiety-inducing triggers doesn't mean we always have to avoid them. And sometimes it's healthy to kind of face them. But if you're unsure, again, I recommend reaching out to a professional for one-on-one support. But we can prepare for it. Next is awareness of the warning signs. So this is more so our body's reactions. Over time, we can kind of pick up that, when we're starting to feel anxious, our bodies will react before our brains do. We kind of get a signal to say, okay, we're actually starting to feel anxious. This could be that sinking feeling in your stomach that you get, even though in your brain, in your mind, in the moment, you're like, I'm okay, why am I feeling this? It's your body's way of saying, okay, we're feeling anxious, something's going on. And the earlier we can catch that, the earlier we can implement our toolkit, our strategies, our mindset to say, okay, I'm feeling this. Let me take a second. Let me get up. Let me go take a walk. Let me get moving a bit. If I have a child, play with them. If you have an animal, play with them. Use those warning signs. They're there to help you, and they can be there to help you. And yeah, then with what works and what doesn't, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes things will work, sometimes they won't. So if you find that breathing, you've given it a try, you've worked with your psychologist or counselor to say, okay, I've given breathing, I've given grounding a try, but they just don't work for me. That's perfectly fine. There's different strategies for different people. There's no one size fits all when it comes to managing anything, not just anxiety. And it's important to know what works and what doesn't. More importantly, as you go through whatever process you're going through, as you go through life, your needs may also change, may evolve to a point where, okay, breathing used to work for me. It's not working for me anymore. Or journaling never worked for me, but all of a sudden I'm actually finding it really useful. And that change can sometimes be difficult, but it's sometimes really impactful into how you navigate the space, using that self-awareness to say, I know where I am, I know it's changing, and I accept that. My next point on independence and support. So as I said, we developed this toolkit so that we're able to independently manage our anxiety as and when it happens, whether it's short-term and long-term. And we do this, through working with a professional, finding our own ways of doing it healthily. And then sometimes we kind of know that, okay, this is something that's a bit more difficult for me. My toolkit isn't quite working right now. I need to reach out for support. I need some external help here. And as I said earlier, it's important to listen to yourself when things like that happen. My final one, which is kind of a summary of everything, is the self-assessment and awareness. So taking a moment to kind of reflect and see, okay, where am I right now compared to where I was? This could be, how was I this morning versus where I am now? I was super anxious this morning, but, after presenting in that meeting, I actually feel okay because I prepared. I know that technique worked for me then. Okay. And the self-awareness can also extend over a longer period to say, okay, last year, this time, doing something that was anxiety provoking. Could even be I think public speaking is a very common one. To say that, I was speaking in public last year and I couldn't do it. And now I'm at a spot where actually, if I need to do it, I'm okay. That's due to my ability to prepare, to understand my needs when it comes to these spaces. I've communicated that, I can do public speaking. I can do it, but I need to use a certain support structure when it comes to that, and being aware of those processes. So always being able to reflect back, where was I, where am I now, is going to be an essential tool for furthering your ability to manage your anxiety. So I would often say that, having that self-awareness is critical to managing your anxiety overall. But with that, it brings me to the end of my section, and I will be handing back to Danica. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your fantastic input, Jared and Katlego. SACAP offers a wide range of registered and accredited qualifications embedded in applied psychology. If you would like to learn more about what we have to offer, please do see the link in the chat box. SACAP Global is a division of SACAP that offers accessible and affordable online short courses and workshops. Course topics include applied psychology, communication, business management, leadership, HR, everyday psychology, and coaching. If you are interested in building practical skills to manage stress, anxiety, and burnout, please do visit the website. The link will be provided in the chat box, and register for an online course. Anyone interested in skill development can register, as there are no entry requirements or conditions. Please do follow us on our various social media channels to stay up to date on upcoming events, program launches, and to see the recording to this webinar. Once again, I'd like to thank our attendees and our phenomenal speakers for joining us this evening. We hope you have a wonderful evening further. Thank you so much.